We're going to jump right in, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of softball questions for you. Just start with a little bit about you, your family, kids, just kind of that background. One of the things people struggle in ownership is balance. I don't really think that exists when you're trying to build a business. I think you just try to have to figure it out. But you're doing two major full-time things, helping to run a city and lead a city. How in the heck, and obviously be a good husband, father, grandfather. How do you, not go crazy with all that you have the responsibility that you have? Welcome back, guys. Thank you for being here. We're in the afternoon hour, so I'll say good afternoon to everybody. We're, of course, alongside Jim Thomas, Jax Kreider, and Brian Podeska, and our honored guest, Mayor John Muns today. We're going to jump right in, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of softball questions for you. Just start with a little bit about you, your family, kids, just kind of that background.
Yeah, I said this earlier, but I grew up in Plano, and we've been very involved in the city of Plano. My dad was the mayor of Plano in 1992 through 1996. So this is we're the only father-son pair of mayors that are in Plano.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's great. So I have two daughters and a son, both adults, and I have 8 grandkids. And
oh, wow.
All of my kids and grandkids live in Plano. So if I'm doing everything else wrong, I'm doing that right. So
you convinced them that Plano was the place to be. Of all the
I wish I could take all the credit for it, but I can't. But our family owned Wyatt's Cafeterias, and so
I loved Wyatt's.
Yes. Now I know whether or not you're in your 20s or 30s, because you would have no idea what that was. But Wyatt's was way back in 1931. Was a grocery store chain. It became kind of in the war period of time when we had all the weapons plants in the mid-cities areas. We realized we were selling more lunch and buffet food than we were groceries. And so we became this cafeteria chain that I worked for about 12 years. And we sold the company in 1988. And we're very fortunate to have done that, because the cafeteria business, as you can see with Luby's and others, has become somewhat of a dinosaur, and it's been very difficult to survive. I was involved in construction and acquisition of sites for the cafeterias. And so we just kind of parlayed right into real estate when we sold the company. And we've been doing that ever since. We developed office, medical office, multifamily in some instances. But one of the things that we haven't done, because of our involvement in the city of Plano, and my dad was my partner, we rarely invested in Plano. And so unfortunately, we didn't reap the benefits that a lot of people have enjoyed over the last, several decades. But we did that to just try to separate any ethics issues or anything like that. Me as a school board member, and he is the mayor. So we continue that philosophy today.
I love how Brian, growing up in Chicago, and Jim from Kansas, like Jacqueline and I were like, "Oh, Wyatt's," and there's nothing from that side of the screen.
Yeah. You had nothing from me. It's an awesome story, but
that was a post church service staple.
I was gonna say, right? That was the Sunday spot. That and Black Eyed Peas, guys. I mean, those were like the places.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter was, when we started having TGI Fridays and Bennigan's and Black Eyed Peas and Chili's, we realized that brand new type of food service was going to put us out of business. And so we needed to either make some major changes or we needed to walk away. And so it was very understandable to people like me, but the folks that have been doing this for 50 years and they couldn't understand how the cafeteria business wasn't going to, survive for infinity. And so it was a difficult choice to make, but it was the right choice.
Man, I'm such a nostalgia person when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like I wish we have cafeterias, Blockbuster Video, and Radio Shack, all of which are pretty much gone. So
I understand.
My family laughs at me because every time we drive around Plano, I point out things that like used to be other things. I'm like, oh, that used to be, and then my kids are like, we don't care like what that used to be. But I remember it, and I'm like, I remember going to that Blockbuster that's now something else.
Well, we will have that conversation together sometime because I love doing that as well. And at least you and I will be very impressed with what used to be there.
Exactly.
Before we kind of transition back into some really Plano-centric questions, I know a big part of the things that we want to talk about is more in depth of the economic development side of things. But before we do that, as we're a business development platform helping people really scale their business and all the aspects of business development, I want to ask you, as a business owner, having known now your background in Wyatt's, and then obviously now in the real estate development, one of the things people struggle in ownership is balance. I don't really think that exists when you're trying to build a business. I think you just have to figure it out. But you're doing two major full-time things, helping to run a city and lead a city, and then obviously making sure that your real estate portfolio and all that is functioning. How in the heck, and obviously be a good husband, father, grandfather, how do you, not go crazy with all that you have the responsibility that you have?
I mean, it's a huge commitment. And I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying, when somebody decides that they want to take on this responsibility, as well as the other things that you're talking about, the other priorities that are so important, it does take a lot of cooperation. My wife of 40 years has been involved in a lot of nonprofits and areas that have made Plano just that much better. And she understood when we sat down before I ran what the responsibilities were going to be. And my kids were very supportive as well. And so it does require a lot of time, a lot of effort. And at the same time, because of the way our system is, you're not going to really get paid a normal salary to do this work. And so you have to be able to have a job or be somewhat independent and being able to give the time back to the city of Plano, because it does require a lot.
Yeah, I want to turn it over to Jim Thomas here for just saying. Jim has really been a mentor of Lyndon's for a long time. He's in the really business development, helping businesses get off the ground with funding, but he got to start, and I won't steal his thunder, in helping gyms, people that want to start gyms and fitness centers and stuff. So he's really been an expert in helping businesses grow, and really a lot of the vision that we have here at The Difference. So when I had, when we were going to have you on, I said, hey, what are some things that we need to know? And he goes, this is some things. So I'm going to turn over to him, because I know he had a number of questions He wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Nathan, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Jim.
Good to see you. And here's my question a little bit. I get involved. I'm a business consultant primarily in the fitness industry. And, we get clients that are doing big box. I'm kind of defining big box as 15,000 feet or better. And then we get others. We're working with one right now who's looking at Plano. That's about 3,000 to 5,000 feet. Okay. And looking to go in. And I got several questions within that. How do you view, economic incentives, for the bigger operations? Are there incentives for the small guy that we're not aware of? And do you have interaction with landlords and brokers and existing businesses? Maybe an existing business has been there for a while. It's not working out. They'd like to exit gracefully. They're careful how they get the word out. Are these things that the city knows about, that our clients can contact someone in the city to help enter that market? Yeah,
that's a great question. Our economic development and our director, Doug McDonald, is doing a great job. And yes, we obviously have the big companies that we talk about incentives. And for many years, all we did was really look at paying for jobs and paying for a piece of the jobs that they were bringing to Plano. And I think what we realized, what we were missing out on, a lot of companies that really bring a significant tax base to Plano, and also those resources and amenities that we really desire. So just in the last couple of years, we've recreated our incentive package, not only for large companies, but for small businesses as well, that can bring, and it doesn't always have to be the number of jobs you're bringing. It really brings about what kind of impact you bring to the community, whether it be, a number of jobs or not. And so we've really kind of added so many incentives to our toolbox. We've even incentivized companies that will hire people from Plano when they start their business here in the city. And so we do have a much more broad spectrum of opportunities for large, medium, and small companies to come to Plano and to have some real incentive access to being able to get off the ground much easier with the help of the city of Plano.
No, that's terrific. Now, do you work with or talk with or have dialogue with like existing businesses that maybe it's time for them to exit for whatever reason? Could be economic, could be a lot of things. And whereas we have a client that's coming in and maybe no one really knows about this, but the city's had some communication with them. Are there things like that are out there?
Absolutely. I think one of the areas that comes to mind is we have had just a few where they were in that legacy business area that had these kind of large corporate campuses that really had no community or really had no amenities around them. It was just this corporate campus that people said, my employees have to get in a car and drive over to Shops of Legacy or Legacy West. They're really, we would like to be able to lease this space, but we would really like some amenities. So we have looked at PepsiCo, Dr. Pepper, SMU that had these large corporate campuses. And we have gone in with the broker and said, hey, what if we put in coffee shops or restaurants or facilities for workout facilities or whatever those might be, to raise that opportunity for a tenant to come in and say, now this is what we really would like to have. And we have been doing that now for the last few years to really kind of ignite that corporate campus back to an operating facility.
No, that's terrific. And if I may ask one final question, a little bit off topic, if you don't mind. I have a son who's 17 years old, and he wants to get in government, and he has high aspirations. From where you sit, what advice would you give somebody like that?
Well, great question.
Yeah, I've got to ask him if he feels okay. Is that something you want to do?
Check him for fever. He might be ill.
I think that's a fair question, by the way.
No, I'm just kidding. But I think some of the real opportunities, at least in my view, you can go to work in Washington, or you can go to work in Austin, or any state capital. But I feel like the kids that really want to intern and work for either a state legislator, a senator, or a state representative, I think those are really good opportunities, probably more so than Washington in that same field, because I'm going to say at the local level, you're going to see us get more done more often. We're going to make decisions, and we're going to move forward so much faster than what you see at the state and federal level. But at the state level, I do think there's some real opportunities to work with a legislator in Austin and to see how the process works. And then, at that point, decide what direction you want to go in, whether you want to go into consulting or whether you want to actually be an elected official. And so I think in my mind, that would be the best path to go through. But if you really want to be a part of just getting things done for your community, the local level is really the best place to be.
We've talked about that a lot when we've had Shelby on the show, Councilman Williams, just because he is loves Shelby to death. He's such a great guy.
Yeah.
And but just talking about how we get involved, and the more the city level of leadership and governance has more of a direct effect on the individual than Washington. And
it really
we spend
does.
most of our time
Yeah.
perusing the news and our Facebook and stuff. It obviously matters. It's very important, but nobody, there's people in Plano that don't know who the mayor of Plano is, and that don't know who
there's a lot.
I mean, we can tell that by how many people come out and vote in these elections, and it should be, it should be at least the national average for the net, but it's not, and we don't think about that because we get
Correct.
I think a lot of people use politics to get riled up and not to realize this is my constitutional opportunity to affect my life and the citizenry around me and our community, and I want to know how to do that from the city level on up. And I think if we start there, then a lot more can happen, and we can be just aware of a lot more things that are happening in our community. We're going to go to break here. When we come back, we're going to dive into our segment, our topic of the month: leveraging social media to increase brand awareness and customer engagement in a local setting. So every business has a brand, but also every city has a brand. You're probably thinking of some cities in your head that have been branded kind of poorly. Well, Plano, a city of excellence, is not one of them. We're going to talk more with the mayor and hear from some strategies from our other co-hosts when we get back. All right, as we come right back here, we're going to jump on into our topic, and I mentioned it before the break, but leveraging social media to increase brand awareness, customer engagement in a local setting. And usually, obviously, we have a lot of business owner guests, nonprofits, and so these are things that businesses should be thinking about, right? A big part of the difference is to help facilitate these conversations and help people realize that everybody has a brand, right? And so one of the things we coach when we bring people on here is like, how you talk, how you present yourself. You've heard of the thing of the concept of first impressions, right? They're so important. Well, why is that? Because a first impression is a sense of brand. And so what your brand is, how many people know about your brand, is it good or bad, right? That's things we want to talk about. So I'll start with you, Jacqueline. In the mortgage industry, of which there are many professionals in the mortgage industry, branding yourself, being different, right? Differentiating yourself, being that difference maker. I know I'm using a lot of intentional difference language for obvious reasons, but how do you,
the difference?
That's right. How do you, what's your strategy because I see on social media a lot, what's your strategy to say, to stand out in a sea of, similar type of, people in that field? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I've been doing this for a long time, right? As far as the mortgage space goes, I've been in mortgage for a little over 20 years. And I've seen good, bad, and ugly. And it's hard for me because I guess I was raised where you are supposed to be a true professional at everything you do, right? So I have a hard time in our space with the people who don't kind of feel the same way. And I'm really, really heavy about the education. Now, mortgage, like I joke all the time, and Brendan and I, one of the other co-hosts, were talking the other time about how mortgage is kind of the boring part of the transaction. Like you don't wake up in the morning and say to yourself, you know what I want to do today? I want to borrow $500,000. But you do say, I want to buy a house, and you don't have $500,000 sitting in your bank, or maybe you have something better you're doing with it, right? Like investing it with you, Nathan. And so then you say, well, I need a mortgage. So I become a necessary part of the transaction, even if you don't necessarily want to need me. And so PBJ was sort of born out of that kind of sticky factor. Like we're trying to make it a little bit more simple and fun and like rememberable, because that kind of matters with social media. We get bombarded so much with like stuff all the time that I feel like it's important to really have a presence that is kind of fun and speaks to people. But we're really big on education. That's probably where you see most of my social media stuff, Nathan, is I'm really big on educating people and just kind of empathizing with the position that they're in, wherever that is, because we've all been where maybe our credit's not perfect, our income's not perfect, whatever that is. And I like to just empower them to be able to kind of move forward. And so when we present ourselves on social media, that's sort of how we present to those three core values: educate, empathize, and empower. And in a fun, kind of silly way. I am kind of a silly person. I have a lot of dogs. You probably saw the photo. That's Peanut Butter and Jelly. That's literally the mascot's names. Yes, I'm that dorky and silly. Sometimes you actually see them get up in my lap, like when we're on show. But I wanted to take an opportunity with this particular question in mind, if he doesn't mind answering it. But I wanted to ask the mayor, like, obviously I've had to spend a lot of time myself thinking of how you brand a business and how you make sure that you come across in a way that is congruent with the way you want it to look. Obviously, you didn't get to really pick the brand for the city, right? You kind of got it, whether you liked that or not. But how do you sort of blend that and figuring out the social media aspect in a city that's existed well before social media ever existed?
Well, communication is always going to be the biggest challenge for everybody, and that includes municipalities. We work so hard to get our messaging out, whether it be communications or public works or police and fire, to kind of give people a heads up. And we use, all platforms as many as we can. And yet it's still a challenge because you still feel like you're not reaching enough of the community, but it's something we work on constantly. And so we don't ignore any platform or any opportunity that we can try to get the word out on certain things that involve our community. And so again, it's a challenge every day, but we work really hard at it.
I'm glad you said that because, aside of the business development and coaching and obviously the podcast itself for these communities, a goal is helping businesses learn how to integrate with the community and be that difference in the community,
Right.
not to beat a dead horse, but you saying that I'd love to find offline, obviously, but find ways that, the difference can help the city of Plano disseminate that message more. And so that's a big part of what we want to do for our listeners. So,
well, and I don't know, Nathan, if you guys agree with me, but it's hard to figure that out. Like, there's so much information, it's almost a little too much at times, right? So it's like, how do I get involved with this, or what does that look like, And so having nice plugins, like how the Community Difference is trying to do that, plugging people in together in a using technology, but then also blending like the one-on-one, like kind of together in a way.
Yeah, I want to jump in on that point because of the fact that there are so many different platforms, as you said, Mr. Mayor, and as we know, things can quickly spiral in the comments and everything else, depending on what the topic is, right?
Yes.
So, question to you, do you have the staff that manages social media accounts, and how does that all work behind the scenes for you guys?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we have folks that manage not only the standard Facebooks and X and Reddit and things like that and Nextdoor, but obviously we also assign the police department and the fire department and public works and things like that their own opportunity to spread those messages as well. But yes, I have quite a bit of help, thank goodness.
I was going to say, well, I never, you don't even really think about the fact it's not just the city. It's like the city. And then there's also like, the police department, the water, you know what I mean? Like all these different people where people information from them. And that's a lot.
We took about 70 people to Baltimore this fall to go to FEMA training for emergency management. And I will tell you that Plano is very well prepared for any natural disaster or whatever it might be. But at the same time, it was so interesting to understand when you're in a situation like this, are you prepared to communicate in all different areas, even when people don't have access to the internet and things like that? So it was a week of really working on planning and how to communicate with the community when you have a natural disaster or whatever it may be. And it made a huge difference. And most of what we spent time on was how to communicate with each other to make sure everything was being done on the field area. So it's a challenge. It really is.
Speaking of preparedness, I think Plano just tested their emergency sirens 29 minutes ago. It happens the first Wednesday of first Wednesday of the month at noon. I noticed that. I was. Yeah. It's funny because I'll hear it. And I'm like, wait, it's sunny. What's going on? Like, oh yeah, it's the test. Okay. So, well, Jim, I want to broaden this. We got about 5 minutes before our last break, and then we'll wrap up our rapid fire segment. But Jim, taking this beyond the municipality, conversation, when you're helping a business get off the ground, obviously helping them with funding, but really teaching and investing in them, like you've done a lot with Lyndon over the years. Branding is obviously very important. I see your social media, just simple things you post, consistency. But what do you do people specifically about branding? Because it goes beyond just social media, obviously, but that's a big part of it. How do you broach that conversation, or when do you broach that conversation in the process of getting a business off the ground?
Yeah, and there's really two components to this, and I'll give you an example. We've got a client right now that they're in desperate times. And we're not even looking at branding. It's everything we do. And I have my little phrase for it. Everything we do, we want the phone to ring, the door to swing, the email to ding, and the text to ping. We want to get a response and we want to make a sale because we have to do that. We don't have a choice if we want to see tomorrow. So branding, sometimes we don't want to do branding. But the way I look at branding is I understand that the people out there, they all consume their content in different manners. Some like podcasts, some like to look at YouTube videos, some like to read. There's all different kinds of things. I've had people tell me, we don't have this now. It kind of went down at COVID, but we used to have an online, they could, for $39 a month, unlimited of me. And they said, Jim, I'd rather pay you more money than do that, just to have you. So everyone consumes their content differently. So we're putting out content at all different levels. It's reels, it's posts, if it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they're all different. They're not the same. Okay. And so we do it different. But my mindset is I'm going to give away 80% of everything I do for free. If somebody's willing to watch it, read it, listen to it, they can do everything I can teach them in a seminar, or everything I can do them in a one-on-one. And we're going to push it out every day because there's always tough times. There's never anything that's perfect out there. And the mindset that we take is we're going to advance and expand into the market. And so we're going to grab market share because somebody else is always going to be in retreat. Somebody is always stepping back, and we're always moving forward with it. And we're simply giving it away, and knowing that people eventually they'll come to where you want to be because they'll consume their content different. That's how we approach it.
So strategy really of who are you wanting to consume your content, and how are they most likely going to consume it? But then also, it sounds like you're saying too,
for the folks that are struggling, you have to have money in the bank, because branding, that institutional style, it's not necessarily going to have that happen immediately. That takes a little bit of time, to build that up and to create that kind of awareness. There are moments where it's crisis. We need money in the bank now. And there's strategies that work well for that too.
Well, Lyndon's in the background, keeping us all in order and keeping us going. I know you wanted to comment. Just take us to break, Lyndon.
Well, one of the things that Jim said about the institutionalized branding, I think that's a big problem that we're all making, because when you think of institutionalized branding, a lot of times, and Brian, you and Nathan have heard me harp on this for the last 3 days, it starts to establish you in a perception of people looking as a commodity, right? There's no uniqueness to it. And I think that in a world, in a digital world today, where everybody is detaching and isolating, we still want to have a human connection. And I think that one of the most important parts is we have got to show who we are, not what we do, as much as anything else, because I think that goes into the know, like, and trust. And I think that, as Jim was talking about, when you get in that desperate mode, it's all hands on deck, getting the next sale. But you've got to think, before you get the desperation mode, how am I connecting with my own community? If you're not connecting with your community, you're going to find yourself in desperation mode at some point in time. You really are. Because the next biggest, brightest, shiniest object with the most money that comes in can put you out of business overnight if you're not careful.
That's a good point. So really, between that and what you're saying, Jim, it's really about timing when you're thinking about these things, but also understanding what the priorities are. I like how you kind of ended this segment, Linda. Let's go to our commercial break. When we come back, we're gonna finish our last segment. We're gonna do rapid fire, some get to know you questions that I think you're gonna love. So stick around. We'll wrap up with the mayor, our co-host, and we'll end the show here. All right, as we wrap up here, a couple of rapid fire questions. Just gonna throw them out there and just kind of a concise answer as we can. One is a little silly, and one is a little more serious. I'll start with this one, and we'll just go in my screen. I've got Jim at the top, and we'll just go across the top here. What is something in your house, okay, or your office that you have too much of? Now, maybe your wife says you have too much. Your spouse, maybe you don't believe you do. But what is that for you, Jim?
It's got to be dogs and horses.
Okay, how many horses do you have?
5 dogs, 3 horses.
Hopefully, horses are not in the house.
Some of them are, but we have lots of animals. We're in the semi-rescue business, I think, unofficial rescue business.
Okay, well, I'm sure they're very appreciative of that. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I'd have to go with clutter. So paperwork. So I need an official declutterer.
I know somebody that actually does that for a living, and I'll have to try to get it.
He's gonna hook up. Nathan's gonna hook Brian up with a declutterer.
That's right. They really do exist. Mayor, what about you?
Oh, that could be so many things. I would say that I have a lot of clutter. I get, for some reason, when we exchange gifts with companies and things like that, I always get a journal. And then I give them
40 journals.
I have at least that many, and then I give them to my grandkids because they like to draw on them and stuff like that. So if I could get rid of some more of those journals, that would be good.
Every time you get a new journal, it's like such possibility. Like, oh, what can I write in here? And then it doesn't.
It's so true.
I was gonna say, you're speaking to the English major. I used to have so many journals. I had to get rid of them all and get the Remarkable 2 instead, because otherwise I just had 40 journals spread everywhere in every room.
Okay, well, now that you've decluttered your journals, Jacqueline, what else do you have too much of?
I have a lot of cups, be it Stanley, Coldest, Corksicle, you name it. I have like 8 million cups. My office manager is always giving me crap. He's like, why do you need another cup? I'm like, I don't know. It's a different color.
There's so many reels and memes about women in their cups. It's really funny. And
well, I'm literally that. I mean, I probably agree with Jim. Dogs is probably another one, because at my office there's 7 dogs.
Wow.
Lyndon, I know you probably have some things that you have too much of.
This is going to show my age, but legal notepads where I take all my notes. I have one for almost every topic, and they're just everywhere.
Can you have too many of those? I feel like that's pretty important.
When you start searching for stuff, you can.
I guess it's not a great filing system. For me,
try the Remarkable 2. It'll change your life. I'm telling you guys.
With 2 kids, 4 and under, we're constantly getting rid of toys or recycle. We have a toy storage in the garage, and then we recycle them into the house, and then others get gone away or given away, and there's still too many. And so my son just had a birthday, and it was all monster trucks basically. And I'm like, we probably have 10,000 cars, and I like cars because I have a whole collection of actually antique and cars in the garage in the shed out back that I collected as a kid, but they're not out here. They're not for playing. So I think my wife would definitely say toys and cars, but I'd have to agree with her in that regard. Okay, last question, and just quick answer, and then maybe one sentence on why you picked this. As entrepreneurs and business owners, we're always reading or listening or to better our businesses ourselves. If you had to give one book or even maybe a movie or a TV show that, hey, as an entrepreneur, you need to check this out, what would that be? And I'm gonna start with you, Brian. I'm gonna put you on the spot here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm a sports nerd, right? We've well established that on all the shows. I've recently, so not a specific movie or book or anything like that, but Kobe Bryant has some great motivational messages on hard work and work ethic and things like that. So I've really kind of navigated over to watching a lot of his stuff. So that's my variation on it, I'd say.
Jim, what about you?
My number one book, I read this a long, long time ago. It was called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And there's since been a whole series of that. And there's one thing I remember first reading that book, because you get so much going on. And for me, it was that first business I'd ever opened. I'm getting everything coming at me. And Don't Sweat the Small Stuff really rang true. But there's one particular chapter in there that said, just because someone throws you the ball doesn't mean you have to catch it. And it really made an impact. And I think for anybody in business or anything, I think sometimes we spend too much time on things that really aren't going to matter.
100%. Jacqueline, 15 seconds.
Okay, that's easy. Who, not how. It just talks a lot about like how you're so focused on how you do it as opposed to who can help you do it, more or less.
I actually got that book. You suggested it before, so I like that. Mr. Mayor, what about you?
Well, I have two, and I'll be very brief. One of them is Boys in the Boat, and the movie came out, but the book was around for a while, and it just talks about you being a team and working together to accomplish your goals, and nobody can do anything by themselves, and so it's really important to work with each other, work well. And the other one was called Smart Brevity, and I gave it to all my counsel before we got started, because the one thing we needed to work on was less talk and more action. And so that's a good book to get your staff to make sure. I don't want to hear the story that takes an hour to tell. I just hit the high points. So
I like that. Well, I have a ton of books that I listen to, but I recently read Swagger by Jimmy Johnson, coach of the Cowboys in the 90s. Phenomenal book on leadership and just getting to peer into how he, as a psychology major, why he was such a great coach, and you can apply that to leadership. So we've got 1 minute before we're done. Mayor, just give a second. I'll let you wrap us up here and send us off. And again, thank you so much for being on. Just give us some final thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a great opportunity. And once again, we talk about communication, but we've got so much going on. We're redoing Collin Creek Mall. We're redoing Willow Bend Mall. We're creating some great almanac space at the Haggard Farm over in West Plano, and we're redoing the EDS campus into science and medicine and areas like that just adds one more business diversity in our portfolio. We have Ryan LLC that's topped off their building. So we have a lot going on, and we're really excited about what's happening in Plano.
Well, I'll have to have you back on to dive into some of those projects too, because
I'd love to
get some updates. So, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Brian, for guest hosting, Jack and Jim, as always. I am Nathan Smith. It's been my pleasure to be here with you guys today. We'll be back next Wednesday at 11:30. Have a great week.
Thank you for watching today's show.